Following Chael Sonnen's retirement, there were a lot of people in MMA media who were giving their responses as far as what they thought of Chael Sonnen's career, whether or not he was a great fighter, how his legacy of taking drugs should factor into that. Kevin Iole had mentioned that he felt that Chael Sonnen was one of the biggest drug cheats in the UFC. Now, granted, he's one of the bigger guys who got caught, but it's arguable to say that there were a lot of guys who were bigger cheats than him. Luke Thomas had put up a video where he was talking about Chael Sonnen's career and basically said he was a very good fighter, but he didn't consider him a great fighter. So Chael Sonnen went in on a big rant on Luke Thomas. It was both on his podcast, but then also on YouTube, where he had a video of the clip that was taken from the podcast, where he was just going in on Luke Thomas and saying that it was absurd that he would just be considered a good fighter and not a great fighter. He was talking about a lot of the accomplishments that he's had within his career and why he feels that that should qualify him for being a great fighter and not just a good fighter. As far as what I thought of Chael Sonnen's initial video, some of the stuff that he was saying about his accomplishments weren't completely true, but for a guy in Chael Sonnen who typically uses hyperbole and talks about how he's undefeated and undisputed, it really, like, it doesn't matter. Like, a guy who tells you he's undefeated after he loses, a guy who, after he loses to Anderson Silva, will say, oh, yeah, I thought I just lost the round when I tapped out. I thought that I tapped out the fifth round, not the entire fight. Like, a guy like that who doesn't mind, like, getting a little hyperbolic about his accomplishments when he says something like, I'm the first guy to be ranked in multiple weight classes, like, that's really not a big deal. But in the response that Luke Thomas had to him, he did discuss that. Another thing that Luke Thomas did, though, is on top of discussing Chael's accomplishments, he also discussed what he considers or how he thinks of Chael as an MMA media personality. And that's really where I think for Luke's response, the response to the end of how good of a fighter was Chael Sonnen, I thought it was fair. Luke's point was that you have a tier for the great fighters like a John Jones or a Mighty Mouse, the guys who were champions and champions for a while, and then you kind of have a tier below that that's still great fighters. Guys like Chael Sonnen, who wasn't ever a champion, but was always like kind of up there in the top of the rankings. So he's just saying, when I don't call you great, I just don't mean you're on the same tier as John Jones. I think that's a fair argument on Luke Thomas's part. But as far as him not being a great fighter in general, yes, Chael Sonnen was a great fighter. I guess it just matters what you define as great, whether you call great the top tier, whether great is meant to be a one of the higher tiers, but not the highest tier. Was Chael Sonnen on the highest tier? I wouldn't say that, but he was definitely very high tier. But the second part about it is really where I started to disagree with Luke. So I'll play that clip here if it wants to come up. So Luke was effectively saying, yes, Chael, you have a bigger audience than a lot of us, but the reason why you have a bigger audience is because you, in a way, he's kind of accusing him of selling out. And this is what he says here. Let me just crank it up so you can hear it.
He talks about media who went to school and didn't go to school. Didn't go to school for that, got a degree in philosophy instead. What I do, ostensibly, and what we try to do here, is push the powerful. You want to make money in media? You want to go far in media? Attach yourself to power. That's what you should do. You'll have no ethics, but you will make a lot of money not challenging power.
All right, so right there's a claim that it's saying that Chael Sonnen is attaching himself to power, that in a way he's like a bootlicker for ESPN or the UFC or a lot of the other promotions, where he's saying that if he has a complaint to make about them, he's not making those complaints just because he wants to be on the good side of Dana and be on the good side of a lot of these other people in power. So that's the claim that's being made there. So it's effectively a claim saying that Luke Thomas is more ethical in how he handles his job than Chael Sonnen is. Continue.
You want to make money in media? Don't tell the truth. The truth is not popular.
Chael Sonnen's effectively a sellout. That's kind of the point he's getting at there.
You will not make money. Very little chance you'll make money doing it. So to me, when he talks about surpassing all of us in jealousy, good for you, dude. It's nice to see fighters go get paid. But you can't do what I do, because what I do requires telling the truth about the welfare of fighters. What I do requires having the moral courage to say, it's not right for Ramzan Kadyrov to have this kind of influence in the sport.
What I do requires having the moral courage. I mean, I think a lot of people who don't like Luke Thomas kind of feel that he is very full of himself and really believes himself to be an upstanding moral character. And there he goes, just kind of saying it right up front.
What I do requires you to say, I'm going to position myself not with power, but against it.
Okay, so that's another point that he's making, is that you have to be against power, not with it. I get the idea in that you don't want to just like kiss up to someone just because you feel like it gives you good connections, that it's good for you in the long run. But with that being said, if the group in power is doing the right thing, you don't have to be against power. You should be against what's right or against what's wrong and with what's right. So if the group in power happens to be doing something good, being against it just for the sake of being against it isn't actually the right thing to do. Now, if the group in power is doing something wrong and you're just like, we'll kind of brush it on the rug because I don't want to ruffle any feathers, that's a problem. But just simply being against power because they have power, that's not a virtue. That's not necessarily a good thing. Continue.
It's not a mystery how you make money here. And look, well, it's a fallen world. I put up the stupid Bieber Cruise video, okay? It's not like I've got some perfect track record. But the next day, or right around that time, is when I put out the study with Eric Kerner about fighter pay and about why they won't unionize and about the structural disadvantages about fighters. Do you know how many opportunities I have lost in this business for speaking out about power? You don't think I could have been further along if I'd done something different? I know exactly what to do. It's just, that's not right. It's not okay. I can do fighter breakdowns. Maybe not as well as him, but I can do it. And I can make goofy ass videos about who won a press conference. Maybe not as well as him, but I can do it. But every time he's had a chance to do what I do, and my record is long, he has taken the promoter's position. It's adopting Dana White's world. And
so this is where he kind of gets into it, where he's saying that every time that Chael has an opportunity to talk about fighter pay or talk about how our promotion's handling things, he's taking the promoter's side, and he feels that this is a problem, that he's taking the side of the promoter. Now, again, like I said, if the promoter's doing the right thing, there's nothing wrong with taking their side. If they're doing the wrong thing, then you probably shouldn't take their side. But right here, his complaint isn't that he's taking the promoter's side when they're doing something that's clearly wrong. It's just he's taking the promoter's side, and that's something that Luke has an issue with.
Viewpoints, and then just laundering it with charisma. It's not what I do. It's not at all what I do. I don't do anything close to that. We can't trade places, at least not you in my shoes. I can go into the other ones. Because you have to, from my worldview, look at everything that's gone wrong and say something about it.
Again, but that's Luke's perspective. So if you talk about fighter pay, Chael Sonnen has a very good idea of fighter pay because now, for one, he's been a fighter and he's had to negotiate for his own pay and has actually been successful in doing so. He actually got himself to get some pay-per-view points in the UFC without having a title, which right now most fighters who have pay-per-view points also have a title. So for him to be able to negotiate that for himself and understand his leverage and understand what he's worth, I think he knows what he's talking about in this realm. And if Luke Thomas disagrees, that's Luke Thomas's position. But it's not like Chael doesn't know about this. And it's not like he can't have an informed opinion on it.
You got to do something at the end of the day. Do you think when I put up that Eric Kerner thing, I thought it was going to do fucking 300,000 views and everyone in the world was going to care about it? No, I know it's not. It's not the point. The point is somebody has to say what's right, and I have fallen off that path more times than I am proud to admit. But I try to center myself and say this is the fact. The fact is the fighters are underpaid. The fact is the promoter takes advantage and has instant.
So again, he says the fact is the fighters are underpaid. Again, for one, like I mentioned before, Chael's a fighter. Chael trains with fighters. He helps out a lot of his fighters and mentors them in terms of how they go about their career and how they go about getting paid. He's also been a promoter. He is a promoter of a show up in Portland. He also promotes BJJ, or not BJJ. It's the Submission Underground, but he promotes that. So he understands from a promoter standpoint what a fighter is worth and what to offer them in order to bring them in. He understands that when you're paying a fighter, you expect to get that money back and then some because you are running a business. The costs the expenses you have should be outweighed by the revenue that you bring in. And he also understands from the fighter standpoint how to bring in more revenue so you can ask for more revenue. So just because he sides with a lot of these promoters, and again, remember in MMA, a lot of promoters go out of business. So if you think fighters are getting underpaid now, and all these promotions are going out of business. Imagine what would be happening in all these businesses if they were getting paid what a guy like Luke Thomas thinks they should be getting paid. And we see it over and over and over again. We saw with Strikeforce, they were like, hey, look, we're going to pay fighters more than what they're getting in the UFC. A lot of the guys who they brought over were getting paid more in Strikeforce than they would have in the UFC. What ends up happening? Well, the group that owns the San Jose Sharks and owns Strikeforce is like, hey, we got to get rid of this asset. We're not making money on it. We're losing it. And they ended up selling off to the UFC. You look at Bellator, they decided right off the bat, hey, we're going to start scooping up some of the top free agents from the UFC. They got guys like Rory McDonald, they got Ben Henderson, Gegard Mousasi. When's the last time they pulled a big free agent over from the UFC? It's been a while. You know why? Because they're realizing that just throwing giant money at these guys isn't always the best move for their business. So just because you think that fighters are worth a lot of money, in theory, that sounds great. Yeah, they do a really difficult job, and it'd be really nice if they got paid a lot. But at the end of the day, if a business isn't making money on them, if a business is losing money, there's going to be no jobs for them to have just in general. So for Chael to have his opinion that he has, it's completely legitimate. It's not as though he has to be against the UFC or all these other promoters. He understands what they're going through from their shoes, and if he tends to agree with them, well, maybe his perspective actually means something.
Structural changes and reasons for why they can't get ahead, and it's not okay. So you wanted me to tell the truth, Chael. I tell the truth. Now it's your turn.
Yeah, and again, he's also kind of saying like, if you're not on the side of fighter unions, then you're not telling the truth. There are other perspectives to it. There are other perspectives that are along the lines of fighters just doing what's best for themselves. They don't necessarily have to be in a union. Chael managed to do very well for himself without having the help of a union. So again, maybe his experience, and it's valuable experience that he has, gives him good reason to believe what he believes. But just because he doesn't have the same opinions as Luke Thomas does on all these things doesn't mean that he's doing something immoral or that he's a bad character who's just a bootlicker for the UFC, who's just trying to do what he can to make as much money as possible at the cost of his morals. I don't think that's fair for Luke Thomas to say that, and I don't really agree with him at all because just because you feel that fighters need to unionize, just and another MMA media personality doesn't come out in that same direction, that doesn't mean that they're doing something wrong or doing something evil. And that seems to be where Luke Thomas was going with his video.